In the heart of the Norse world, there is a deep and fascinating paradox that permeates the idea of masculinity. On one side, we find the Viking hero, an audacious and complex adventurer who, besides his athletic abilities and imposing stature, with flowing blonde hair, is capable of commerce, poetry, and art. This is the Viking who writes beautiful sagas, carves runes into stones, and explores the seas in search of new lands. He is a symbol of culture, intelligence, and bravery, seen as the ideal of virtuous masculinity, balanced between strength and sensitivity. On the other hand, the wild and uncontrolled figure of the Berserker emerges, a dark incarnation of the same Norse culture. The Berserker is the warrior who succumbs to blind rage, entering battles consumed by an uncontrollable fury, often induced by rituals or substances. He pillages, destroys, and rapes, his violence transformed into a whirlwind of chaos. Unlike the civilized hero, the Berserker does not seek to honor traditions or cultivate his land. He embodies masculinity in its most destructive and primitive aspect, a brutal contrast to the refined image of the merchant and poet Viking. This paradox of masculinity in the Norse world is more than just a dichotomy between hero and monster. It represents a profound conflict over what it means to be a man in a society that values both physical strength and courage, as well as culture and sensitivity. Both aspects, the heroic adventurer and the brutal berserker, coexist within Norse mythology, reflecting the tensions that defined what was expected of men in that era. Some modern interpretations have sought to soften or even parody this duality. The image of the heroic Viking, often romanticized, has taken on almost tender contours in some contemporary cultural reinterpretations, as if the Viking were a brave explorer with a noble heart, rather than a warrior navigating for pillage and conquest. Films, television series, and even representations in games and comics have transformed the Viking figure into a symbol of adventure and camaraderie, where the more violent values are diluted into a more acceptable version for modern audiences. However, the predominant myth remains that of the adventurous and heroic Viking, who feels perfectly confident in his place in the world. This Viking is seen as the masculine ideal, a figure of physical strength, courage, and honor. But what is often overlooked is that this myth is not fixed or harmless. It has been reinterpreted in unsettling ways throughout the centuries. In the mid-19th century, for example, the figure of the adventurous Viking was used to promote views of masculinity that exalted brute strength and dominance over others. These discourses often simplified or distorted the rich cultural tapestry of the Norse world, transforming it into a symbol of exaggerated and oppressive masculinity. Today, the Viking myth continues to inspire groups that embrace extreme ideologies, many of whom use the Viking figure as a symbol of traditional and rigid masculine strength. The Viking, with his power and dominance over others, becomes, for these groups, a figure of masculinity that legitimizes oppression and domination, both of women and of other groups seen as weaker or subordinate. Thus, the Norse myth of masculinity, specifically that of the Viking warrior, cannot be considered irrelevant in the modern world. Scholars recognize that these myths have a continuing impact on how masculinity is viewed and practiced today, especially among certain groups sympathetic to extremist ideas. However, the figure of the Viking warrior does not represent only brute strength and destruction. He also embodies an inner struggle, a conflict that reflects the need for balance between heroic rage, personal honor, courage in battle, and openness to love and community. The heroes of the Norse sagas often face difficult choices that test their masculinity not just in terms of strength, but also of wisdom and compassion. Thor, for instance, is a god of strength and war, but he is also a protector of his family and the common people. Odin, the wise, has a more introspective nature, sacrificing himself in search of knowledge and spiritual power. The Norse myth of masculinity is, therefore, a window into these eternal tensions. Whether in the figure of the Viking hero or the berserker, it reflects the challenge of balancing strength with wisdom, rage with compassion, and dominance with respect for others. And these are questions that continue to resonate in our contemporary society, where definitions of masculinity are still evolving, just as expectations of what it means to be a real man are changing. Now that you've heard the legend, enjoy the music we created especially for this story. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share it with someone you think will enjoy it too. It helps us a lot to keep bringing more amazing content for you. Thanks for watching.
Where the cold winds blow, brave hearts gather around the final stories left to sow. With axes raised to the heavens and dreams that touch the sky, we sail across the ocean, our spirits wild and high. Sons of the North, we stand together, bound by honor through stormy weather. In the face of the rage, we find our way. Warriors of light will seize the day. With the strength of ancient giants, we carve our paths anew. But beneath the armor's bravado, our hearts feel the truth. For the fire of the berserker burns deep within our soul. Yet the poet's heart whispers, urging us to be whole. Sons of the North, we stand together, bound by honor through stormy weather. In the face of the rage, we find our way. Warriors of light will seize the day. The tales of old, we learn to be brave, to embrace the wild. Yet the tender heart we save, through battles and trials, we rise and we fall. For true strength lies in love, the greatest gift of all. Sons of the North, we stand together, bound by honor through stormy weather. In the face of the rage, we find our way. Warriors of light will seize the day. With the strength of ancient giants, we carve our paths anew. But beneath the armor's bravado, our hearts feel the truth. For the fire of the berserker burns deep within our soul. Yet the poet's heart whispers, urging us to be whole. With the strength of ancient giants, we carve our paths anew. But beneath the armor's bravado, our hearts feel the truth. For the fire of the berserker burns deep within our soul. Yet the poet's heart whispers, urging us to be whole. Yet the poet's heart will seize the day. In the tales of old, we learn to be brave, to embrace the wild. Yet the tender heart we save, through battles and trials, we rise and we fall. For true strength lies in love, the greatest gift of all. Lies in love, the greatest gift of all. In the tales of old, we learn to be brave, to embrace the wild. Yet the tender heart we save, through battles and trials, we rise and we fall. For true strength lies in love, the greatest gift of all.